Hello friends and welcome into the Cowboys Report. I am your host Tom Downey, back again with another Cowboys Rumors Roundup with some news items sprinkles in as OTAs are almost finished up for the Dallas Cowboys. So first up, is Leighton Vander Esch still out? Well, 4 stars on this one per Mike Fisher. Now yes, this could change at some point in the final phase of OTAs this week for the Cowboys, but as of right now, LVE is still out with a pelvic injury, did not participate in the first 2 OTA groupings. Of course, there are 3 total. Now, again, I think this makes some sense for the Cowboys. Yes, it's at least a little bit concerning that LVE is a bit banged up and isn't participating right now in OTAs with that pelvic injury, but also, why would you want to rush him back? There's really no need, if you're the Cowboys, to jeopardize anything long-term with Leighton Vander Esch. Does he need preseason reps, or at least a lot of them? Not really. So why bother pushing him back? Now, the Cowboys, of course, want him out there. Here's how things, again, per Mike Fisher, have looked during OTAs without Leighton Vander Esch. And take note, of course, Jalen's still your Mike linebacker, but take note where Sean Lee is playing. Back in his more recent home, before he made, of course, the move over to the strong side linebacker spot, over at the weak side spot, replacing Leighton Vander Esch in that area. And although, yes, Justin Martzler does run the most with the strong side backers there, that would, I think, be more of a rotation. God forbid LVE misses time. It is Jalen and Sean Lee, and then it's probably some combination of JML, Chris Covington, Joe Thomas, and maybe another linebacker if the Cowboys carry one more beyond the everybody else on that depth chart there. So again, I'm not really concerned about this for Leighton Vander Esch. If it continues to be the case and we come back again a month from now and he's missing time in training camp and the preseason, then I'll be concerned. But this still strikes me more of a, let's be super cautious here, because why would we want to rush anything on that front? All right, next up, is Zack Martin the best player? Of course, I mean the Cowboys here. I waffled on how many stars to give this one. I had it down as 3, then I switched to 2, and then I switched back to 3 stars because this is who I think is the best Cowboys player, but there are also multiple strong arguments for several players, and yes, this is a good problem to have for the Cowboys. You can make a very strong argument for DeMarcus Lawrence, a very strong argument for Ezekiel Elliott. Arguments can be made even for Tyron Smith and Amari Cooper and even Byron Jones, and of course both linebackers Jalen Smith and LVE. But let's not forget with this about Zack Martin. I know maybe he's not the most important player, which I think is a different question to answer on that front. And maybe he's not the most, flashy player because he is an offensive lineman. But Zack Martin's been an all-pro, either first or second team, in each of his 5 seasons. That's kind of insane to think about. That the dude came in at Notre Dame, instantly one of the best guards in football, and I still think right now is the best offensive guard in football. Now, I did put this up on YouTube as a poll on our channel, so A, make sure you're subscribed, youtube.com/Dallas Cowboys Report. And I should have expected this, really. This should not have been a surprise to me at all. Zeke got 72%, which I get. And I know many make the argument, oh, look what happened when the Cowboys didn't have Zeke. And, of course, didn't have Tyron Smith, to be fair on that front, too. But I'll make note, we've seen Zack Martin in his NFL career miss 1 meaningful game. That, I'm not counting the Giants Week 17. That didn't really matter. The Cowboys held out a bunch of different players in that one. But in a meaningful game against the Colts last season, the Cowboys couldn't even score without Zack Martin. Now, of course, there are multiple factors in play, just like how there were for the Cowboys offense having issues without Zeke Elliott last year, or without Tyron Smith last year, or excuse me, 2017 for those players during Zeke's suspension. So yes, you can make a great argument for Zeke and DeMarcus Lawrence and others, and I certainly get this argument, so why it's not a 4-star rumor here. But I think I'd go with Zack Martin, who somehow I think is still one of the most underrated players in the NFL, maybe even underrated by Cowboys fans. All right, more offensive talk here. Only 25 snaps per game for Jason Witten. Of course, that was the initial report / expectation / comment by the Cowboys. I am still only going to give this one the 1 star, brought back up with Jason Witten's recent comments here. Now look, the players and coaches have, of course, hyped up Witten's return by saying he looks great, he's faster than he was last year, it's best shape of life season, even applies to Jason Witten. Here's the thing, though, about the 25 snaps per game. Did Jason Witten really come out of retirement to play about 37%? That's about the number that 25 snaps would be, based only on last year's production or snaps per game. Cowboys had just over 1,000 snaps last year. divide it by 16 games, blah, blah, blah. It's about 67 per game. That equates 25 is about 37%. Of course, I'm rounding overall there. But about 37% of the snaps. And yes, it's weird to say 37% is too low for a 37-year-old. But here's the quote from Witten. He's anxious to prove that he can go play. And he knows that maybe he doesn't play every snap. And I certainly don't think he does. But, quote, my job is kind of to make it tough on them. We all benefit if that's the case. For the Cowboys, the younger players like Dalton Schultz and Blake Jarwin, and of course Witten himself. I have a tough time seeing the Cowboys bringing Jason Witten out of retirement, paying him like a top 20 tight end, and saying, yes, you're going to play just over a third of the snaps this season. I think you'll see Witten approach more of the 50%. Yes, you'll still see Blake Jarwin. Yes, you'll still see Dalton Schultz. And yes, you don't want to run Witten into the ground by the end of week 1. But what happens if it's a close game in the fourth quarter and Witten's at 20 snaps already? Are they not going to lean on their old reliable Y option play call that Witten always finds a way to get open on? Is he not going to play some in the red zone still? I have a tough time seeing Witten only getting 25, which is rare because normally I make note of how I think the Cowboys have overestimated their snap counts. But I think Witten gets more than 25 snaps a game. Let me know what you guys think. Type O for over if you think it's going to be more than 25 per game for Witten, and type U for under. Again, I think it's going to end up being the over there. All right, some more Cowboys rumors here. Does Taco Charlton need to break out? Not will he break out, but does he need to? This one's 4 stars for me. Now, yes, there are exceptions where you see players break out after year 3, but for the most part, if a player doesn't show better promise or doesn't have a breakout year, or maybe there's an injury exception there, you don't find players who struggle for 3 years and then suddenly break out in year 4 or year 5, especially not with that same team. And frankly, Charlton has been a disappointment so far. There's really no way around that as far as I'm concerned. And he's, of course, currently missing OTAs due to an ankle injury, which, again, is not really what you want. So for Taco Charlton, I do think it's pretty much now or never. Now, maybe it could come later with a different team. That's certainly plausible. I'm not saying it's a guaranteed done deal. But in reality, it kind of needs to happen right now. In his career numbers, that's not enough. Now, if he can come close to matching his career numbers this year, maybe it's not a full-fledged breakout, but I'll consider that more of a partial breakout, and that's a big deal for the Cowboys. Now, in fairness to Taco, it's really not all his fault. He has been stuck behind some good defensive linemen in recent years. DeMarcus Lawrence has been great for the Cowboys when healthy. Crawford's been a reliable role player. Randy Gregory last year was more of the pass rusher. And now you bring in Robert Quinn. Of course, Gregory's future is up in the air remaining. And you have Dorrance Armstrong, and you have Kerry Hyde. You drafted Joe Jackson and Jalen Jokes. Charlton's going to have to earn those reps. They're not going to be handed to him like, say, Connor Williams reps were handed to him last year, or Byron Jones handed reps at cornerback. So for Charlton, he has a pretty tricky path relative to other players who have in a similar situation to have that actual breakout. So I ask you, will Taco have a breakout year? Type Y for yes, type N for no. I'm certainly hopeful, but I have a tough time seeing just the raw snaps being given to Taco to have that type of break unless he really wows in the preseason, which hopefully does happen. But in terms of likelihood, it's probably a little bit more likely that he doesn't than that he does. Let's talk roster bubble here on the receiver side. Allen Hurns and Tavon Austin, are they on the roster bubble? I'm going to give this one 3 stars because, yes, I do. And, of course, both players do play a role that the coaching staff likes. We know the coaching staff is high on Allen Hurns, despite his contract. And we know that Tavon Austin brings the dynamic game-breaking ability in passing game and on returns that the Cowboys really don't have much of. Now, for Hurns, neither of these players are guaranteed spots. Now, I would be a little bit surprised if both were cut. I think that would count as a surprise to me, even though you can save $5 million by cutting Hurns. Maybe ask him to take a pay cut. And obviously, many of you have accused me of being an Allen Hurns hater. I get it because I know what I say. But if you cut that $5 million down to 2.5, that's much more palatable. For Tavon Austin, meanwhile, remember, Tony Pollard can do some of the similar things. Pollard's more of a running back. Austin's more of a receiver for the Cowboys, at least. So there is some overlap there. Meanwhile, The Athletic says that John Vay Johnson, yes, I know you guys are all hyped about him, Reggie Davis, and Lance Lenoir, who I hope does not make this roster at this point, have impressed in OTAs. Again, it is OTAs. But those are 3 of the lesser-named players on the roster, not even including Noah Brown, Cedric Wilson, Devin Smith, Jalen Guyton. So for the Cowboys, there is kind of a glut when it comes to that number 4 to that number 6, 7, 8 receiver range. You've got 3 guys, I think, in reality locked in because of their overall talent, because of their contracts, because of their draft status. That is Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and Randall Cobb. Those 3 players are making your roster. So now the question becomes, how many receivers do you carry? Do you carry 5? That's kind of light. Maybe you carry 6. I think that might be the right number for the Dallas Cowboys. So which 3 of the following are you taking? And you can include, if you want to in the comments, the honorable mentions of Reggie Davis, of Devin Smith, of Jalen Guyton. But pick 3 receivers to keep on this roster. And maybe it's only 2. It makes it tough. Allen Hurns, Tavon Austin, Lance Lenore, Cedric Wilson, Noah Brown, John Vay Johnson. All those guys have a reasonable path to make the roster, but the body count doesn't work out in their favor. So which 3 are you keeping? Let me know in the comment section. I'll include Devin Smith and then Davis and Guyton as well in the comment we post on the channel here. But let me know, which 3 are you keeping? I think it's a tough debate there for the Cowboys, which in the end is probably a good problem to end up having. All right, one last rumor here. How about signing Matt Bryant? I'll give this one 2 stars. I would have interest in it for sure. I don't know how the Cowboys necessarily feel, nor how Matt Bryant feels. Now, Bryant has long been a good, if not great, NFL kicker, beyond like 1 year where he kind of struggled, and it was in his early 40s. It's like, oh no, he's over, and then he bounced back and it was fine. My point for the Cowboys, and I suspect maybe we are actually already here, is that there's no reason to just give Brett Maher the kicking job. There's really no reason for that. Now, I'll make note, the Cowboys have not signed anybody after the draft, and Matt Bryant, I think, would be an upgrade over Brett Maher. He was great last year, missed 1 field goal on over 20 attempts, missed 5 on 39 in 2017, great in 2016, yes, a bad 2015, but has been pretty damn good since then. Now, yes, he's older, and I don't think he wants to necessarily go through an OTAs and a minicamp and maybe part of training camp because he's a 44-year-old kicker. You kind of have it or you don't. There's not as much strenuous activity involved from a kicker as, say, being a defensive lineman. But maybe, and I'll make more of this in our next video coming up here on Wednesday, maybe the Cowboys already did bring in kickers and we kind of missed it. Because the Cowboys have used Casey Redfern as a kicker in OTAs too. Now, I'll make note for Redfern, we'll dive more into this tomorrow. Redfern was a kicker at Wofford College. So when they signed him, it was announced as a punter. He says as a punter on the website, and he's been a punter for the Detroit Lions in the past. I thought maybe he came in to compete with Chris Jones. So we'll adjust our depth chart going forward. We'll put Redfern at both spots. So just keep an eye on that going forward if you're as Cowboys fans and in training camp, and more importantly than preseason. If there's nobody brought in, well, maybe it is Redford then that pushes Brett Maher. Either way, I really see Dallas go after Matt Bryant. Hey Cowboys fans, thanks for watching the Cowboys Report. If you haven't already, click right here to subscribe to our channel for all the best Cowboys coverage on the internet. That's news, rumors, highlights, mailbags, film studies, and a whole lot more. And I'm making your lives a little bit easier as well with the next Cowboys Report video right here.